All right, ready to dive in. Today we're looking at Mark Manson's The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Feck.
Oh, interesting choice.
We've got this great Medium article that
Okay.
really breaks down some of the key ideas.
So are we talking like a summary or more of a critique?
I'd say it's a bit of both. It definitely summarizes the main points, but it also kind of digs into whether Manson's approach actually works.
Nah, so it's going to be interesting to see where we land on that.
Totally. The author, Sajjad Pakdam Nansavoji, doesn't hold back, which is great.
I like that. Let's jump in.
Yeah, let's do it. So, the first chapter, Don't Try.
Okay.
Manson uses this really interesting example, Charles Bukowski.
Bukowski, yeah, the writer, right?
Yeah, exactly. He was known for, well, let's just say his unconventional lifestyle and
Right.
his kind of pessimistic view of the world.
Yeah, not exactly your typical self-help guru.
Not at all, but that's what makes him such a fascinating example.
So how does he fit into this don't try philosophy?
Well, Manson argues that by not being so focused on traditional success, Bukowski actually achieved it in a way.
It's like he defied expectations and ended up carving his own path.
Exactly. And it kind of makes you wonder, like, do we sometimes get in our own way by trying too hard?
I could see that. It's like when you're so fixated on a goal that you get paralyzed by the fear of messing up.
Totally. Maybe there's something to this idea of letting go a little.
Embracing the possibility of failure, even.
Yeah, maybe. And that leads us perfectly to the next chapter, Happiness is a Problem.
Uh-oh, that sounds a bit, provocative.
It is. Manson introduces this thing called the feedback loop from hell. Have you heard of that?
No. Can you break that down a bit?
So it's basically this idea that the more we try to avoid discomfort, the more unhappy we become.
Really? So, like, running from our problems makes them worse?
Kind of. Think about it. Someone's constantly seeking pleasure, avoiding anything negative.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
They might overspend, indulge in food, just constant distractions.
But it's all surface level, right?
Exactly. Those things only provide temporary relief. They don't address the root cause of their unhappiness.
And actually, avoiding those deeper issues just amplifies them.
Exactly. So Manson argues that real happiness, lasting happiness, comes from solving problems, not avoiding them.
Okay, so facing your fears head on kind of thing.
Yeah, I think so. Think about times you felt really fulfilled. It's usually after overcoming a challenge, right?
Yeah, there's definitely a sense of accomplishment that comes with pushing through something tough.
Right. Like you rarely hear someone say, man, I felt so fulfilled after binge watching that entire season.
Haha, yeah, true. It's the struggles, the growth that seems to stick with us.
Okay, so we've got Don't Try, Happiness is a Problem. Now get ready for this one. You are not special.
Whoa, hold on. That sounds a bit harsh, doesn't it?
I know, right? But before you get defensive, let's hear Manson out.
Okay, fair enough.
He's not saying we're all completely insignificant or anything,
All right, go.
but he challenges this idea that we all have to be extraordinary to be happy.
Interesting.
He uses this example of a woman named Pamela who's constantly measuring herself against like this perfect version of success.
Oh, I know those types. Social media is full of them.
Right. And it just leads to this constant sense of inadequacy, like she's never enough.
So Manson's saying, what, we should just settle for mediocrity?
Not exactly. It's more about finding contentment in being ourselves, embracing our normalcy, so to speak.
Okay, I can see that. It's about accepting yourself for who you are, not who you think you should be.
Exactly. And this idea of choosing our values carefully kind of ties into the next chapter, the value of suffering.
Suffering. Now that doesn't sound very appealing.
Oh, no, right?
Yeah.
But Manson's argument is that suffering isn't inherently bad. It's the meaning we attach to it that matters.
Okay, explain that a little more.
He used this really interesting comparison. Dave Mustaine and Pete Best.
Musicians, right?
Yeah, Mustaine, super ambitious, gets kicked out of Metallica right before they become huge.
Ouch.
Right. He goes on to form Megadeth, successful, but always carrying that what if.
I see. And Pete Best.
The original Beatles drummer, replaced by Ringo Starr.
Right, right.
He kind of fades from the spotlight, but seems to find contentment in other areas of his life.
So what's the point? Are we supposed to just accept suffering?
No, not exactly. It's more about recognizing that struggling for something you value gives it meaning.
Like choosing your battles, the things you're willing to fight for.
Exactly. The question is, what are you willing to suffer for? What are the values that drive your choices?
That's deep. I had to think about that one.
Me too. But it really emphasizes this idea that we have to be intentional about what we prioritize in life.
Okay, I'm starting to see how these ideas are all connecting.
Right. It's not just a bunch of random provocative statements.
No, it's starting to feel like a framework, a way of looking at life.
Yeah, and this leads us perfectly to chapter 5. You are always choosing.
Okay, what's that one about?
Manson uses this story of William James, this philosopher, who believed that even when things are out of our control, we still have the power to choose how we respond.
Okay, so like we can't always choose what happens to us, but we can choose how we react to it.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
a subtle difference, but it's super empowering.
It puts you back in the driver's seat, right?
Yeah, instead of feeling like a victim of circumstance, it's like we always have a choice. Always.
Powerful stuff. So, where do we go from here?
Well, this idea of taking responsibility for our choices leads us to another key concept: intellectual humility.
Intellectual humility.
Yeah, in chapter 6, you're wrong about everything, but so am I.
Oh boy, that title.
I know, right? But it's not as harsh as it sounds.
Okay, I'm listening.
It's about being open to the idea that we might be wrong, and being willing to change our minds.
So, like admitting when we've made a mistake.
Exactly. And it's not about feeling bad about being wrong. It's about being open to learning and growing.
I see.
He uses this cool example, the Wright brothers.
The airplane guys.
Yeah. Their path to success was full of failures and setbacks.
Makes sense. I mean, they were inventing something completely new.
Right. But what allowed them to finally achieve their goal was their willingness to be wrong, to adapt, to try new things.
So failure wasn't the end, it was part of the process.
Exactly. And Manson argues that the more comfortable we are with being wrong,
Yeah.
the more we're open to new information and experiences. And that leads to growth.
Okay, I'm getting that. So like, instead of getting defensive when someone challenges our beliefs,
Yeah.
okay, we can see it as an opportunity to learn something new.
That's a good point.
And it takes the pressure off, like we don't have to be right all the time.
Yeah, that's freeing.
Totally. So we've got being open to being wrong. Now, how about this? Failure is the way forward.
So we're just supposed to embrace failure.
Well, not exactly celebrate it, but definitely see it differently.
How so?
In chapter 7, Manson gets really personal, sharing his own failures.
Like what kind of failures?
Businesses, relationships, creative projects, all kinds of things. So he's saying everyone fails. Even someone who writes a bestseller on not giving effect.
Exactly. It's a part of life, And instead of seeing failure as a roadblock,
Okay.
he encourages us to see it as like a stepping stone.
A stepping stone. I like that.
So it's about changing our perspective. Instead of I failed, it's I learned something valuable.
Yeah, reframing it as feedback, a chance to improve.
Exactly. Think about it. Have you ever had a major setback that, looking back, actually led to something positive?
Oh, definitely. I mean, not fun at the time, but sometimes those tough experiences push you in a new direction.
Right. You learn new skills, meet new people. It can be a catalyst for growth.
So it's not about seeking out failure, but about not being afraid of it.
Exactly. And seeing it as an opportunity to learn. Okay, now for something a little different, chapter 8, the importance of saying no.
Saying no. I feel like that's something a lot of people struggle with.
Totally. We live in this culture of always being busy, saying yes to everything.
Yeah, like you have to be on all the time.
Right. But Manson argues that saying no is actually a form of self-care.
Oh, interesting. So how does that work?
Well, we only have so much time and energy, right?
That's for sure.
So by saying no to things that drain us, we create space for the things that matter.
Okay, I get that.
It's not about being selfish. It's about being intentional with your yeses.
Making sure they align with what's important to you.
Exactly. And what's interesting? By saying no to the wrong things,
Yeah.
you actually open yourself up to more authentic yeses.
So it's about creating space for the things that really light you up.
Exactly. And it ties into everything we've been talking about: taking responsibility, choosing your values, setting boundaries.
Wow, we've covered a lot of ground. I'm really impressed with how all these ideas connect.
Me too. It's like a puzzle, Each piece fits together to create a bigger picture.
And what's even more impressive is that this is all just from the first 8 chapters.
I know, right? I'm really curious to see what Manson explores in the last chapter.
Me too.
But for now, maybe we should just take a moment to digest everything we've discussed so far.
Yeah, good idea.
What's resonating with you the most? Any aha moments?
Oh, definitely. What about you? It's crazy how, Manson can take these, big philosophical ideas
Yeah.
and make them so relatable.
Totally. He's not just talking over our heads. He's really trying to help us, apply this stuff to our lives.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And before we jump into the last chapter, I think it would be helpful to kind of, explore
Okay.
how we can actually put some of these ideas into practice.
Yeah, totally. Like, let's start with that feedback loop from hell thing.
Okay.
So we were saying how avoiding discomfort can actually trap us in this cycle of unhappiness.
Right, right.
So how do we break free from that?
Well, it starts with becoming aware of it,
Mhm.
like noticing when we're reaching for those quick fixes
Right.
instead of dealing with the root of the problem.
So instead of like pouring another glass of wine or scrolling through Instagram when we feel
Yeah.
stressed, we should be asking ourselves, like, what's really going on here?
Yeah, what's causing this discomfort and what can I do to address it, directly?
And that can be tough, right? Like,
Yeah.
sometimes it's easier to just numb out than to actually face those uncomfortable feelings.
It is, but the thing is, those distractions only provide temporary relief.
Hmm.
They don't actually solve anything.
And in the long run, they can actually make things worse.
Right. It's like putting a Band-Aid on a broken leg.
Oof, yeah. So facing those uncomfortable feelings, even though it's hard,
It's hard.
it's actually the key to breaking free from that cycle of unhappiness.
Exactly. And, it's interesting how this ties back to that idea of choosing what we suffer for.
Oh, yeah, right?
Like, it's not about seeking out pain for the sake of pain,
Yeah.
but recognizing that some level of discomfort is going to come with any worthwhile goal.
Right. So whether it's sticking to a workout routine or pursuing a creative passion or even just speaking up for what you believe in, there's going to be some struggle involved.
Absolutely. There will be challenges, setbacks, moments when you want to quit.
But it's those challenges that ultimately make it meaningful.
Right.
Right.
Exactly. Because you're pushing yourself towards something you truly value. You're not just going through the motions.
I feel like those challenges become badges of honor almost.
Yeah. They show that you're willing to put in the work, to endure the discomfort, to achieve something you believe in.
Okay, but how do we know we're choosing the right battles? Like, there are only so many fucks to give, right?
Right. That's where that idea of saying no comes in.
Ah.
Remember how we talked about setting boundaries and prioritizing what really matters to us?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, that's crucial for making sure we're not wasting our energy on the wrong things.
So it's about being able to differentiate between what's truly important and what's just a distraction.
Exactly. And that takes practice. It takes honesty with yourself.
Yeah.
And a willingness to, challenge your own assumptions.
Because sometimes we think we care about something, but deep down, it's not really that important to us.
Yeah. Or maybe we're just afraid to say no.
Yeah.
Afraid of disappointing someone or missing out on something.
Right, right. But ultimately, those no's, even though they can feel tough in the moment, they free us up to say yes to the things that really matter.
Exactly. It's like clearing out the clutter to make space for what you truly love.
I love that. And it's not just about saying no to other people. It's about saying no to ourselves sometimes, too.
Oh, totally. Like saying no to that extra slice of cake or that late night Netflix binge.
Yeah. Because those things might feel good in the moment, but they're not really serving us in the long run.
Right, right. It's about making choices that align with our values, even when it's tough.
And sometimes we're going to mess up. Like, we're going to say yes to the wrong things or give a feck about something that doesn't really matter.
Of course. We're all human.
But that's where that intellectual humility comes in, right?
Ah, yes. Remember that. Being open to being wrong.
Yeah, yeah. Being able to say, okay, I messed up. I need to reevaluate my priorities.
Exactly. And that's not always easy, It can be tough to admit when we've been wrong.
It can. Especially when it challenges our beliefs about ourselves.
Right. But that's part of growth, isn't it? Being willing to let go of those old beliefs that no longer serve us.
Yeah, to see things from a new perspective, to be open to change.
Exactly. And that openness, that willingness to be wrong, is what allows us to keep learning and evolving.
I love that. It's like by embracing the fact that we don't have all the answers, we actually open ourselves up to a world of possibilities.
Absolutely. And that's a much more exciting way to live, don't you think?
Oh, definitely. So much better than clinging to old beliefs and being afraid to make mistakes.
For sure. And, speaking of mistakes, I think it's important to remember that failure is an inevitable part of life.
Right, like we were saying earlier, it's a stepping stone.
Exactly. And in that chapter on failure, Manson talks about how it's not about celebrating mediocrity, but about recognizing that setbacks are going to happen, and it's how we respond to them that matters.
So it's not about avoiding failure, it's about learning from it.
Exactly. It's about using those experiences to grow, to improve, to become more resilient.
And to not be afraid to try new things, even if we might fail.
Exactly. Because the fear of failure can be so paralyzing. It can keep us stuck in our comfort zones.
It's like that saying, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Exactly. So even if we fail, at least we tried, right?
Hey.
And we learned something in the process.
Yeah, that's a much healthier perspective, and it ties back to that idea of choice that Manson talks about.
Oh yeah, how even when things are tough,
Yeah.
we still have the power to choose how we respond.
Right. We can choose to wallow in self-pity, or we can choose to see it as an opportunity for growth.
Exactly. It's all about perspective. And that's so empowering. It means we're not just victims of circumstance.
We have agency. We have the power to shape our own lives, even when things don't go as planned.
Exactly. And that brings us to that final chapter, the one with the rather thought-provoking title.
And then you die.
Yeah, that one.
I know it sounds kind of morbid,
It does.
but the review says Manson doesn't actually dwell on the, depressing aspects of death.
Right. It's not about being afraid of dying. It's about using that awareness of our mortality to fuel a more meaningful life.
Oh, I see. So like a carpe diem kind of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that our time here is limited, and that should inspire us to make the most of it.
So not just focusing on accumulating stuff or achieving some arbitrary definition of success, but on really living a life that matters.
Exactly. It's about asking yourself those big questions like, what do I want my legacy to be?
Wow, those are big questions. And it's so easy to get caught up in the day-to-day grind that we forget to even ask them.
It is. But by acknowledging our mortality, it forces us to prioritize, to let go of the trivial stuff and focus on what really matters.
It's like a wake-up call, reminding us that we don't have forever.
Exactly. So how do we want to spend the time we do have?
That's a good question. And I think that's something we should all be asking ourselves, not just in the context of this deep dive, but in our lives in general.
Totally agree.
So before we wrap up, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge how much we've covered in this deep dive.
Yeah, we have.
We've gone from not giving effect to the meaning of life. It's been a wild ride.
It has. And so insightful. What's resonating with you the most?
Yeah.
What are you taking away from all this?
It's kind of amazing, right? We started talking about not giving effect, and now we're having these deep conversations about life and meaning and all that stuff.
It's funny how that happens, huh? But I think that's a testament to Manson's writing.
Yeah.
He makes you think. He pushes you to, confront those big questions.
Totally. And it's not about, having all the answers or being perfect,
No, not at all. It's about making conscious choices, about figuring out what matters to you and letting go of all the other noise.
It's like finding that freedom to be yourself,
Exactly. It's like saying, screw the expectations. I'm going to define what a good life means to me.
And it's not about being indifferent. It's about being intentional, choosing what you give a feck about.
Absolutely. It's like we have this limited amount of energy, right? We can't care about everything.
Yeah.
So we have to be selective.
And that's where that idea of saying no comes in, right?
Yes. Remember that. Saying no to create space for more authentic yeses.
It's like by setting those boundaries, we're actually opening ourselves up to new possibilities.
Totally. And it can be hard at first.
Yeah.
Saying no to things we feel obligated to do or that we're afraid of missing out on.
It can. But it's so worth it in the long run.
Absolutely. It's about honoring your own needs and priorities and creating a life that truly reflects who you are.
It's about taking back control, not just reacting to everything, but being proactive, making conscious choices.
Yeah, becoming the architect of your own life, so to speak.
I love that analogy. And I think that's really at the heart of what Manson is saying, It's not about following some set of rules or achieving some external definition of success.
Right. It's about figuring out what works for you.
Right.
What brings you joy, what makes you feel alive.
And having the courage to pursue those things, even if they're different from what everyone else is doing.
Exactly. And that journey is going to look different for everyone.
Yeah.
There's no one-size-fits-all approach to a good life.
Yeah. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the subtle art of not giving a feck, I think the big question for everyone listening is, what one thing will you choose to give a feck about today?
That's a good one. What's the one thing you're going to prioritize that will bring you closer to that, authentic, fulfilling life?
It's about taking all these ideas we've talked about and actually putting them into action.
Exactly. Because it's one thing to understand these concepts intellectually.
Right.
But it's another thing to actually live them,
Totally. So if you're feeling inspired by this conversation, we definitely encourage you to check out Manson's book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Feck.
Yes, it's worth the read.
And until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep choosing what to give a feck about.
Well said.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.